Our first speaker, we get to hear from the great future priest, Deacon Yaakov.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I'll be speaking about, if I'll sum it up in one word, it would be rejoice. My topic today is rejoice. Now, we're told to rejoice at Yahweh's feast, but how do we rejoice? Well, I looked it up in the Strong's Expanded Exhaustive Concordance, and it comes from number 8055, and it means to brighten up, to be gleesome, to rejoice, be glad, joy, joyful, merry, and cheer up. It usually refers to a spontaneous emotion or extreme joy, which is expressed in some visible and or external manner. Now, there's also some things in the Brown Driver Briggs on page 970a. So you see, the word rejoice means to brighten up, to cheer up, to be joyful. Now, who rejoices? Well, everyone should rejoice. When we come before Yahweh, we should rejoice. If you turn to Psalms 105, verse 3, that's on page 476. Psalms 105, verse 3. And it says, "Glory in his holy name. Let your hearts rejoice, all who seek Yahweh." All those who seek Yahweh, who come before Yahweh at his house, all those who come before him should reverence Yahweh and be joyful or rejoice. Now, when do we rejoice? Well, we rejoice at Yahweh's feast days, his Sabbaths, his new moons, as you heard Pastor last Sabbath talking about coming to the new moons, because we should rejoice when we come there. We're coming before Yahweh, so we should rejoice. The new moons and also the high Sabbaths. If you turn to Deuteronomy, well, first turn to Leviticus 23. It goes over all the feast days. Leviticus 23, verse 2, it says, "Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them concerning the feast of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. These are my feasts." Verse 5 says, "On the 14th of the first moon, between the two evenings, Yahweh's Passover sacrifice is to be killed." And verse 5 through 8 goes over the feast of Passover and unleavened bread. Then if you turn the page, Leviticus 23:21 talks about the feast of Pentecost. Leviticus 23 verse 24 talks about the Feast of Trumpets. Verse 27 to 28 talks about the Day of Atonement. And then Leviticus 23 verse 34 to 37 and 42 talks about the Feast of Tabernacles. So those are Yahweh's feasts. Then if you turn to Deuteronomy 16, verse 11, it says, "You shall rejoice in front of Yahweh your Father." I think I read that wrong. "You shall rejoice in front of Yahweh your Father." It says rejoice. Rejoice in front of Yahweh when you come to Yahweh's feast. You and your wife, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, the Levite who lives within your city, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widows among you, at the place Yahweh your Father chooses to establish his name. Now, this isn't an option. You can rejoice if your brother didn't step on your toe that morning, then you can rejoice. But if he steps on your toe, then you don't have to rejoice. You can push aside those 613 rules. No, it's a command. You have to keep the laws, and you have to rejoice at the feast. that Yahweh has ordained. Now, verse 13 says, "You must observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days, after you have gathered from your threshing floor and from your winepress. And you shall rejoice at your feast, you and your wife," and then it goes through all the people there. So you see, no one is left out here. Everyone has to rejoice when they come before Yahweh. Now, where do we rejoice? We rejoice at Yahweh's house. We go to the priest, then we go to Yahweh's house, and we rejoice. Now, why do we rejoice? Well, first, Yahweh commands us to rejoice when we come before Him. And another reason why we should rejoice is because we know something that the world doesn't know. The world doesn't know about Yahweh's laws and Yahweh's feasts, so we need to all rejoice. Praise Yahweh. Now, if you turn to Nehemiah 8, and we'll start at verse 1. It says, "All the people gathered together in one body in the open square. So they came together in unity." It's on page 397, Nehemiah 8, verse 1. It says, in the open square in front of the water gate. "And they requested Yisrayl the scribe to bring out the book of the law given through Moshe, which Yahweh had commanded Israel." Then if you turn to the next page to verse 2, it says, "So Yisrayl the priest brought the law before the congregation, which was made up of men and women, and all who could understand, on the first day of the 7th moon, which was the Feast of Trumpets." So you see, they brought the law. Then verse 3, if you skip down to the last part there, it says, "All the people listened attentively to all the words of the book of the law." So when they came, they listened. Yisrayl the scribe stood on a wooden podium, which was constructed for this purpose. And then there were people standing to his side. Then if you skip to verse 5, it says, "Then Yisrayl opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was standing higher than all the people. And when he opened it, all the people stood up. When Yisrayl praised Yahweh, the Almighty Father, saying, 'Hallelujah, Yahweh,' all the people then responded, saying, 'Hallelujah, Yahweh, let it be so,' while they all lifted up their hands. Then they worshipped and paid homage to Yahweh, the Heavenly Father, bowing their heads with their faces to the ground. They explained," if you skip down to verse 8, it says, "They explained the readings from the book of the law, making it comprehensible, so they might understand the meaning. Then Nehemiah the governor, Yisrayl the priest and scribe, and the Levites who instructed the people, said to all the people, 'This day is holy to Yahweh your Father. Do not mourn, nor weep,' for all the people wept when they heard the word of the law. Nehemiah said to them, 'Go, enjoy your rich food and sweet drinks, and send some to those who have nothing prepared. This day is holy to Yahweh. Do not grieve, nor sorrow, for your joy in Yahweh is your strength.' The Levites also urged the people not to grieve, saying, 'Hold your peace, for this day is holy. Do not grieve.' Then verse 12 says, 'Then all the people went away to eat, to drink, to share portions, and to rejoice at this great feast of trumpets, for they understood the things that were revealed to them.'" So they rejoiced because they knew that this was Yahweh's word. And so praise Yahweh. That's what we should be doing here today. We should rejoice. Do not mourn, as it says here. Do not grieve nor sorrow, because your joy in Yahweh is your strength. Now, if you turn to Matthew 5, Matthew 5, verse 12, it says, well, let's start at verse 10. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of Yahweh. Then if you skip to verse 12, it says, Rejoice, and be exceedingly glad, for greatest is your reward in heaven. So you see there, even if your brother or one of your brothers in the house of Yahweh steps on your toe or does something to offend you, you still have to rejoice. You have to rejoice. Now, Philippians 4:4, you don't have to turn there. Philippians 4:4 says, Rejoice in Yahweh always. Again, I say, rejoice. And then also, 1 Thessalonians 5:16 for your notes. First Thessalonians says also to rejoice. Now, so I looked up some pictures for my speech, and in the world they don't rejoice, as you see in this picture here. The Pope is mourning, also is the world. They're mourning and fading away. Now, the Pope isn't rejoicing, so we'll put our X right there. Now, I went back to see what occurs in the house of Yahweh. And pastor's rejoicing there, so we'll put our check mark. In this picture, he's rejoicing too, so we'll put our check mark. In this picture, he's rejoicing too, so we'll put our check mark. In this picture, he's rejoicing too. In this picture, he's rejoicing and saying, Come to the feast, so you can rejoice too. And then also, in this picture, he's saying, Rejoice too. Remember, come join the royal family of unified believers, gold and purple. So you see, pastor is saying to rejoice. Rejoice because you know something that the world, they don't know. And in conclusion, did you hear what I said last Sabbath? Rejoice. So if y'all please stand. It's my honor and privilege to present to you the great Khan Ilya Hyler Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. In the news today, we're going to take a look at Israel. And, of course, Israel has shut down the area around the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Temple Mount. They've actually shut that down. And remember, that's under the control of the Jordanian government. But Israel has shut it down, and Palestine is calling it an act of war. Now, Israel shut it down due to someone being shot, an Israeli being shot and murdered. Also, Russia recently signed a gas bill with the Ukraine. If you remember, it was not long ago Russia shut off or was shutting off the gas to Ukraine. And they've signed a bill, but watch who it involves. It also involves the EU and the IMF. They're involved in the signing of this bill. Next is an article that we want you to pay close attention to. John Kerry is calling for democracy to solve the problems that are taking place in Syria. And with what John Kerry says, you can tell that he's getting his instructions from the Pope. Of course, that's the one spoken of in Revelation chapter 6 and verse 2, that one who sits on a white horse with a bow in his hand. Of course, that bow is war, and a crown on his head, and that's an office, and that's given to him to conquer and to conquer. Now, Kerry says that we need to use democracy, not war. Now, keep in mind, at the same time, the United States is presently bombing inside the Syrian borders without Syrian permission, and this is the same man that's saying that we should use democracy, not aggression. And remember, the Pope recently said we must stop them, not with war, and then it wasn't but a few days later he said sometimes war is necessary. Now, I want to read this to you very quickly. This is out of the Mark of the Beast, Volume 1 on page 10. Pastor says, the first seal in Revelation 6:2 started with the persecution recorded in Acts chapter 8. setting a pattern of religious leaders who pass themselves off as ones of righteousness, while persecuting the true followers of Yahweh. The white horse is pictured in Revelation chapter 6, verse 2, to show us this false religion will pretend to be righteous and even resemble righteousness when in fact it is totally against all of the laws of Yahweh. And remember what the Pope recently said, that some people want to make up rules for salvation. Well, of course, he doesn't, because he's against every one of those rules or those laws. And then, last but not least, there's a teacher in Tennessee who is standing in front of the school board, and they're recording her conversation, and she's telling them why she's quitting her job. And listen at the disrespect that teachers go through today. And I can say, for one, that we see this when we go into schools. It's not far off from, even in the state of Texas, what teachers are going through. And the school boards are doing absolutely nothing about it. Now, if everyone please stand very quickly, pay close attention to what Vladimir Putin was saying. He was saying that we need laws that we can live with, and that this world right now is in crisis. Well, at this time, I'd like to introduce the only one that can bring these laws we need to live with, the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrayl, Abel Hawkins. Shalom, everyone. Praise Yahweh. There we go. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The peace of Yahweh is Yahweh's laws. Get that in your mind. That's what Yahshua said. May the peace of Yahweh be with you, Putin. He's saying we need laws that we can live with. The Pope says, let me quote the Pope quickly before you get that out of your mind. I know I got his letter here. I better have. If I don't, I'm in trouble. Here it is. The Pope, he says, are we open to the gift of God? Now remember, he said peace is a gift of God. And then he was asked, well, didn't you go to pray at the rock wall, the Wailing Wall? And he said, yes. And didn't you come back to Rome and invite them here to pray for peace? Yes. Well, why aren't you having peace? He said, I think it comes with merit. Well, now here he's saying it's free. You know, it's a gift of God. And on the other side of his mouth is coming out, well, I didn't get my prayers answered, so it must be coming with merit. Well, what merit, Pope? What merit is it? Putin just gave you the answer. We need laws that we can live with. Then he goes on to say, or do we prefer to take refuge in the safety of our man-made rules and regulations? He's calling the Ten Commandments man-made rules and regulations. He's against every law of Yahweh, every form of holiness, while he brings forth his stinking dykes, his queers, his gays. Did you hear the woman? She said, we've got everything here in this auditorium, and we got people beating children on the heads with calculators. What do we do? What are you going to do about this? Well, they have no answers. Putin gave them the answers. Putin, the Prime Minister of Russia, gave them the answers. You need laws. You need laws you can live with. The laws that you have stink. All they are is something to make more money, and putting people in prisons, turn them out, let them go do the same thing again. They get no education there. Education, character education, and righteousness is the only thing. And of course, submitting
and coming to unity with those laws, which brings great teachers. They've got to have great teachers in order to bring unity. That's what we're training for here right now in this building. We're training to be teachers and got children training to be teachers. Soon we'll have schools all over the world, but not before the Pope destroys the earth. The Pope is responsible for this, every bit of it. We have here a scientist dare warning about destruction of the soil. Now, and people push this off, but let me tell you, this is really serious right now, what this man is talking about. He's an international soil scientist, is calling on government focus attention on the most important issue facing world soil quality. It's a real crisis, what we're facing here. And what they've got themselves into, the mess they've got the soil into, is what he's talking about. He says 90% of the food comes from annual sown crops growing in soil. Well, any fool ought to know that we have to grow our food. We have to grow our food in order to eat it. Your fruits, your vegetables that you're told to eat to keep you healthy, okay, you grow it in soil. Well, what have we done to our soil? That's what this man is telling in this article, the things we have done to the soil. Soil feeds us. It's as simple as that, he says. His name is Dr. Baker. Says, yet we're paying no attention to what we're doing to it. The government and its ministries can provide leadership on this. This is what Putin is telling you. Our government should be providing leadership. Instead of that, they're providing leadership in war. That's all they got their mind focused on, is beating down their enemies, while they're allowing something that could starve humanity to death. Yes, it's starving you right now. There's no food value in the soil. There's no food value left in the soil that we're raising. The government and its ministries can provide or could provide leadership on this by recognizing how we've been raping our soil, he says, for years, and introduce measures to restore the essential nutrients. Dr. Baker, who majored in soil science, that's microbiology, by the way, and we're teaching this. I'd like for everyone next new moon to remember Isaiah 66 and all appear before Yahweh on the new moon and listen to that microbiology program. It's something you really need to learn, so you can see, first of all, how Yahweh created you. That's where I noticed it the first time, was in the Holy Scriptures, not in biology, but it made my biology lessons more interesting after seeing this in the Scriptures. But he says he majored in soil science and PhD in agriculture engineering from Massey University. Says, for generations, the world has been stripping the soil of carbon, and he just names two, carbon and organic matter, and giving nothing back. If you remember how Yahweh said to use the restroom, and he gave this law to Yisrayl. Now, where this is done, you may not understand, not knowing biology, not knowing what microorganisms is and how they're working to bring forth life to you in the things that you raise. But when you deposit these things back in the earth, as Yahweh tells you to do, you actually enrich your soil. And of course, you can do the same thing with cow manure, goat manure, sheep manure, chicken manure. All of this stuff, you put it back in your soil, it enriches the soil. You can even put it in a mulch pile, and you can let it turn strictly to stuff you could actually put in your mouth if you wanted to. It wouldn't hurt you if it breaks down perfectly. But the fact is, you need to put it in your soil and then eat the food that grows from that soil, and you will be doing what this Dr. Baker is saying that we haven't done for years. All we've done is strip the soil by using commercial fertilizers. We've stripped it of its organic use, of its healthy use. He says the end result is that the organic matter and carbon levels in all of the world's arable soils, all the world, have declined cumulatively over the long period that's elapsed since man began man began sinning, using sin to raise his food. I changed it just a little. Most of the world's arable soils that may have had, now get this figure, write it down, 6.6 to 16%. All the soils had at least 6 to 16% of organic matter before. Now they have 0.1%. All the soils that we're using to raise food on. This is it. You can get one of these odometers, I think. Maybe that's what you call it. It's a soil tester. And you can stick it, it's got 2 prongs or 3, and you stick it down in the soil. If you stick it in your flower bed where you've been using organic matter to enrich your flowers to make them bloom, it'll probably give you ideal soil conditions. Stick it in the ground where the farmers are raising food, and it'll tell you nothing. This soil needs help. And you could take it down the road here a mile where organic matter has been used for a few years, and every place you stick it, it says ideal conditions. You can prove these things to yourself, brethren. If you don't believe what the Scripture says, you can actually prove this. But he says most of the world's arable soils that may have had 6 to 16% of organic matter before now have 0.1% as a result of man's activities. That's low level of organic matter. That low level of organic matter won't support the soil biology, which lives on organic matter. Now, what's he talking about here? Now, I know that you boys have been studying the microbiology, that you know what he's talking about. By soil biology, Dr. Baker means the microbes and other soil organisms that teem in healthy soil. These soil microbes hold the soil particles together and stop the erosion even. Yes, they stop the erosion. This is a great article that he put out, and I want to put newsletters out on it. But you know, I've been writing news articles and sending them out to the news agencies, and of course they're going over big now, really big. And here it is. This one this week was Yisrayl Hawkins explains how Ebola fits into prophecy and what to expect next in new article. Now, there's been over 45,000 news medias already run this. It just came out yesterday, by the way, but praise Yahweh. And 45,529 news agencies. Now, the news agencies sent us a special report this time because we're at the top and in reading. And Now, when I show you this is mind-boggling. But in like in Louisville, Kentucky, their audience is 2,039,287 readers. That's one newspaper, one news agency. In Chattanooga, Tennessee, theirs is 2,046,587. That's just two newspapers now, and you're going over 4 million people there that this is coming before. These news articles coming before. Spartanburg, South Carolina, another 2,099,000. Bay City, Maine, 2 million. Burlington, VT, what is VT? Vermont. Okay. Okay, another 2 million. Henderson, Indiana, another 2 million and over. I'm going to skip a bunch of these, but they gave us a bunch of them. I'll go on up to the higher numbers. In Portland, Oregon, 4 million readers. 4 million readers read that article. I've skipped a bunch of them. Indianapolis, Indiana, 4,728,121. 4 million, over 4 million, almost 5 million people. That went before. Hartford, Connecticut, 5,472,819. Now you think of the news medias that we're reaching here, and you see those numbers right there, and this one has already gone to 45,000 of these. So you can quickly add up the numbers in your mind, if you got a calculator mind there. You can see that this message of the kingdom of Yahweh is going out to all the world by leaps and bounds. And that right there, we're going to take a big swing to righteousness, because the people are reading this and they read the Pope's letter. You know, they're going to think twice now. They won't be taken into deception so quickly. That and the microorganisms, the soil depletion. The food is worthless now. That seems like it's coming from the stores. They're wanting us to keep quiet, of course. They don't want us to tell that to the public. The big business, this is why, the food depletion that you're living off of, if you're living off of sick plants, of course you can't help but take in sickness. What they don't want to admit is that we got STDs in the soil also and in the plants. And this right here is going into the bodies of the people. We're also putting it in the lake waters. They're drinking their own urine now out of the lake waters, which is getting worse. Fort Phantom now, where they're all praying for rain, had the mayor praying for rain along with the preachers. I wonder if they would say, as the Pope said, why aren't you getting rain? Well, we got one rain, as $400 million worth of hail came with it, and high winds, but little water, no runoff. Now, this is their prayers. This is their prayers not being answered, of course. Isaiah 59 tells you why. I've thought about renting some billboards and saying, try Acts 3:19. Well, of course, there's big business in sickness. And I hate to, it seems like so evil for people to promote sickness for money. But that's what's taking place. Big business in breast cancer. I'm sure many of you saw this. It's on the news, and of course, it's been 20 years since they started passing out these pink ribbons, and I think they went to purple this year. But all they did is change colors. They haven't found an answer. They haven't found a cure. In fact, it's worse now than it was 20 years ago. This right here was 20 years ago. Millions, they're saying 1 in 5 surviving. If you remember, Dr. Hayes brought a sermon on that and said these people are not surviving. If you live 1 month over 5 years, they say you're a survivor. Even if it kills you the day after the 5 years is up. But they know you're going to die shortly after that operation that would last 5 years. How long would you live, he said, if you didn't have the operation? Well, at least 5, maybe 10 or 15, because it's not the cancer that kills you, he said. It's the complications of cut, poison, and burn. And that's exactly what the senators were saying here just a few months ago, and we brought it out on the news here. They cut, they poison, and they burn, but they don't cure cancer. Well, the big money in it, the billions of dollars, and they're taking in billions of dollars on this pink ribbon campaign and now the purple ribbon campaign. Well, the Pope says he still hasn't got sense enough to know that breaking the laws is what's causing this. But he's coming against the House of Yahweh, and I told him, you do this, and I'm going to come after you big time, and I'm going to show how stupid you are. He's the one that says, don't keep the 10 Commandments, don't keep the laws of Yahweh, they're just written by men. Well, what is his rules written by? They're written by people, men who rape children. Yes. Written by men who rape children. They're written by men who have their hands in the big money that cancer and all other diseases bring in. They own the hospitals. They own the drug companies. They got their investments in all of these places, so they're bringing in big money in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is the richest organization on the face of the earth. They don't know what to do with it. You know, they can't take it to hell with them. It's going to burn too. The gold and silver will melt there in fervent heat. So what are they going to do with it? They're just going to sit on it and show themselves how rich they are. Well, that's what Yahweh said to Satan, if you remember the 14th chapter of Isaiah, that you've really collected a lot of wealth. What are you going to do with it? He who seeks after silver will not be satisfied with it. In the end, you certainly won't be satisfied with your silver, your gold, or whatever, but they keep seeking after more. And he calls the 10 Commandments written by men. He doesn't even believe in religion to begin with. Religion all came from Yahweh. Yahweh started the first religion and showed Adam and Eve. He showed Adam and Eve how he made the world, how he created them and the earth, and he said, you've got to guard and keep this way. I just read you an article by Dr. Baker saying, we have neglected that law. That's what he's saying, and he's wanting the government to come back now and do something about it. That's what Baker was writing about. The first law is given to Adam and Eve and saying, guard and keep this way. If you don't, he says, dying, you're going to die. And that's exactly where the world is right now. Everyone in the world has a disease. There is no one in the world that doesn't have a disease. Some of them are chronic diseases. Many of them are. And of course, chronic disease will kill you. That's what I'm talking about when I say chronic disease. There are chronic diseases that will kill the person that has them. And everybody on earth has diseases. Many of them are chronic. More than what they're admitting are chronic diseases. 1 out of 5 have this. 1 out of 6 have this. 1 out of 3 have this one. You know, it all adds up. Well, Yahshua said to us, in being on guard against the Pope in these last days, he said, if you'll turn over with me to Matthew, he's talking about this deception that the Pope has, the sway he has over the world right now. And this sounds really great to someone who doesn't want to refrain from seducing his neighbor's daughter, or refrain from committing adultery, fornication, bestiality, or sodomy. It sounds real great. We're lawless. That's what Putin said. We could live, I guess, in a world without law. He said, I guess we could live in one without law, but it would be rather difficult to do so, to live in a world without some guidelines. And Yahweh gave to Adam and Eve these perfect guidelines, absolutely perfect guidelines, and said, keep your appointments with me. Well, of course, certain ones did. Certain ones did keep their appointments with Yahweh, and Yahshua said, you're going to see those people in the kingdom, and you yourselves who won't keep the laws of Yahweh, you'll be cast out. The keys of this blood offers you nothing. Flesh is useless. Blood is useless. That's what Yahshua showed you in Yochanan 6:63. It's useless. It's worthless. Unless you're begotten from Yahweh's laws as Yahshua was. Yes, he was begotten from the Spirit from Yahweh. The Spirit from Yahweh is the laws of Yahweh. They took over his entire life like they did his mother. They just overshadowed his life. And he lived by every law of Yahweh. That's the reason he sits right now as high priest saying, be careful now in these last days because deception is going to be really, really great in these last days. You find that here in Matthew 24. The first time he says is when he was asked about the end of the age or the end of the world. If you see that in verse 3. And then he says in verse 33 and 34, he shows this as the last generation when you see these things taking place. Well, the deception is one of these things that he says is going to be rather extreme. And, of course, his word, like the word of the House of Yahweh, is going out to all the world. That's the increase in knowledge that Yahweh gave to his house, of course, in these last days. But Satan is using it too. The Pope's words are going out to the entire world. And so is the message, verse 14 of Matthew 24, so is the message of the kingdom of Yahweh. The message of the kingdom of Yahweh is, don't let any man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous just as he is righteous. But he who commits sin is of the devil. So you have two groups of people. You have the Pope leading the people of the devil. That's what you have. First Yochanan or 1 John, if you have a King James Version, they both say the same thing. 1 John 3:4, sin is the breaking of the law. 1 John 3:7 says, let no man deceive you. The same thing that the Savior is saying here concerning the Pope and his words, saying, well, these were just written by man. Yes, that's right. They were written by man. But there was a big difference, Pope Francis. These words were inspired by a higher being who was able to foretell your future. And your future is you're going to burn, he says. That's your future written. Before that, he said there's going to be an increase in knowledge and tells you it's going to be in this generation. Explain that one. If it was written just by mere men, and you know yourself that no man can foretell the future, no human being, it's not possible. Your days are darkened like Jeremiah said they would be. Your days are darkened. You can't see the future. The seals were put on the scriptures that you took to Rome, the book of Yahweh that you took to Rome, along with the other artifacts that was in the temple. Seals were put on it by Yahweh, and you locked it up. For 1,500 years, you locked it up. How did he know you were going to do that, Pope Francis? He prophesied this in advance, that you would destroy the temple and you would take the artifacts to Rome, where you did. You took all of this and you locked it up, where no one could even read it. You took light and wisdom away from Yahweh's people. Then you slaughtered Yahweh's people. I'm talking of the Roman Catholic Church. And you know yourself that it's in Acts, the 7th chapter. The Apostle Paul was one of your soldiers who Yeshua met on the road and showed him the truth, and he converted. And he went to teaching the laws of Yahweh then, again, using the name Yahweh. He wrote many, many books that you need to read. One of them is 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 9, where it says that queers, that's sodomites, that's gays, will not be selected for Yahweh's kingdom. 1 Corinthians 6:9. Those words are plain. No one needs to explain them to you. Just read them for yourself. Yes, it was written for a man converted by Yahweh and inspired by Yahweh to write for us today things that he could not have known on his own. Prophecies. He made prophecies that could not have been known by mankind, and yet he wrote them down for us, and they're being fulfilled at this time, which proves that these words that was written by man were inspired by a higher power, a power that has wisdom, that can foretell every future event down to the detail. In the last days I will establish my house. My house will bring you the kingdom, the message of the kingdom. How could he know this? And how could he know that you would allow finally this book of Yahweh that you stole from the temple and took to Rome? How did he know that that would be put back in the hands of the people? How did Isaiah know this? And how did Yeshua know this when he said, this message is going to be preached? When you took it to Rome and locked it up? Somehow or another, Yahweh opened the locks. You see that, Pope Francis? What a miracle this is. Mankind couldn't do this. He brought that book of Yahweh back, and it's in operation right now, saying, in the last days I will establish my house, and it will take this message to all the world. No, we have it under lock and key. They can't get to it. All your schemes of men to make money. That's the reason you overlook this simple thing. He brought it right out from under your nose, and now it's all over the world, being spread all over the world today. Something you thought was impossible because of your great Roman army that you thought would keep control of the world forever. Well, one of our famous presidents said you can fool a few of the people all the time. You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And Yahweh saw to it that you did not. Well, in Matthew 24, if you have a King James Version, Matithia, remember you changed his name, Pope Francis? That's in your archives too. The Catechisms of the Catholic Church. It's in some other books now because they've found out about it too. Well, in chapter 24 and 14, he shows that this message is going to be preached in all the world and then the end. So you can count your days now. You can start counting your days. It's very near. This generation started in 1934. We have history shows this date. That's the year I was born also, under the nose of Satan, who is trying to find me in Germany. That's where you sent your soldiers out to try to kill me, in Germany, killing millions of people who kept trying to keep the laws of Yahweh. You killed them by the millions. Some say billions. Did you know you wiped out that many people that was wanting to follow the Scriptures, Pope Francis? You got mountains of blood on your hands. You're going to be guilty. This generation is going to be guilty of all the blood that's ever been shed on the face of the earth. And your days are numbered right now. We're in the end of this generation. This message is going out right now, and soon the end will come. Nuclear war, I just saw an article this morning. It said, could tactical nuclear weapons, could that be what they're using in Syria? Well, then the man spelled out that when tactical nuclear weapons are used, certain debris is left. And they're finding this debris that is only produced from nuclear, not the conventional bombs that they said they would use or they agreed to use. We're going to kill these babies with this conventional bomb. That'll make it more righteous. We won't kill them with the nuclear bombs. That's evil right there. Well, like Eve did with Satan, she chose to be evil like the gods. Like the Catholic Church today, who is choosing to be evil like the gods. Yes, that's what you are. You're being led by Satan. He who practices sin belongs to Satan. He who rebels against the house of Yahweh belongs to Satan. He who rebels against the priest in the house of Yahweh belongs to Satan. That narrows it down pretty finely, don't it? Only those who will come to complete unity, like Yahweh, like Yahshua himself, he came to complete unity because he loved the laws of Yahweh. Why would I love the laws of Yahweh? I do. Maybe not as much as Yahshua did, but I certainly love them with all I've got. Why would I love them? Because I hate sin. I hate the wickedness and evil of sin. Sin rapes children. Sin steals from people. They take things that's not theirs. Sin, that same sin, brings on hatred, fighting, and wars. And this is what we're seeing right now. It also brings on what the other laws are trying to prevent, sickness and disease, which you're getting rich off of, and that's your goal. You have a right to seek gold and silver, and you've made it your life, along with Satan. Your riches, you've collected a lot of riches. Well, riches don't bring salvation, and neither does your words that you're putting out against the laws of Yahweh. They won't bring salvation. Blessed are those who keep Yahweh's laws, because they only have right to the tree of life. That's Revelations 22, verse 14. 12 through verse 12 shows you that's Yahshua doing the talking. Chapter 7 of Matthew, chapter 7, it shows you your tree. Yes, yes, your tree, the Catholic Church. And all of those who don't bring forth righteous fruit, Pope Francis, righteous fruit, keeping the laws of Yahweh, 1 John 3, 4, 7 and 8, those who will not bring forth this righteous fruit, Matthew 7, will be gathered up and cast into the fire. It will leave them neither root nor branch. You won't have any keys left for any blood at all. There's nothing that will ever bring forth your fruit again. No, that's what Malachi 4 said. It's going to burn like an oven. Oven? Where you think of an oven on a cook stove, think bigger. Think nuclear oven. A nuclear oven, starting with a nuclear baby, found in our book called The Nuclear Baby. Well, here in Matthew 24, he's warning you of that and saying this is going to be preached in all the world. Verse 14, Matthew 24, 14, it'll be preached in all the world by the one who bears witness at Abel. Even more to it than you left in your King James Version when you was trying to hide the name and other things, but all of those things, and then it'll bring forth this message of the kingdom complete, which we're doing right now, and you haven't been able to stop it, and you haven't been able now to deceive the whole world as you once had them deceived. there for a short time. So in verse 14, it's preached. And if you go over to Zechariah, it shows you even the one that will preach it, that will be giving you all of this opposition. It tells you. It names it out. It even shows in chapter 6, verse 9, 11 through 12, chapter 6, 11 through 13, that's Zechariah. I believe you named that Zechariah in the version put out that was authored by your king at that time. Zechariah, taking out the name of Yahweh off of the end of it. But chapter 4, and if you look there at verse 1, he says, the messenger, that Moloch, it means messenger, who talked with me, came again and wakened me as a man who is wakened out of sleep, and said to me, what do you see? What do you see? He's asking him, what do you see here? And of course, he actually showed him Revelations, what was said in Revelations, the first chapter. But read it here. He said, what do you see? He said, so I said, I see and behold a lampstand. This was the lampstand. This is the lampstand, Pope Francis, that you have hidden. You have it locked up under keys where it's all locked up so nobody can get to it, so you can hide that bit of knowledge. But the knowledge came anyway. Increase in knowledge, yes, that was spiritual knowledge too he's talking about in Daniel 12. But he says, I see a lampstand, all of gold, with its bowl of oil on the top of it, and with the 7 lamps. That's the 7 works of Yahweh that's going to bring to naught everything that Satan has accomplished in 6,000 years. We're it. We're going to be the first to have that power. And we're hacking away at that tree right now, fixing to put it in the fire. And there are 7 pipes on the 7 lamps, and there are 2 olive trees. Notice 2 olive trees. You'll find these spoken of also in Revelations, the 11th chapter. That's the prophecy that must be fulfilled in a short time. Revelations, remember. That was revealed to Yochanan when you had him in prison. Yes. And now his words are being read in this last generation by the house of Yahweh and explained. And there was 2 olive trees by it, and one upon the right side of the bowl and one upon the left side of it. So I spoke to the Moloch who talked with me, and I asked him, what are these, my ruler? Then the Moloch who talked with me answered and said to me, do you not know what these are? Now wake up, Pope Francis, wake up, because he's asking you here and going to give you an answer. What are these 2 olive trees that are also shown in Revelations, the 11th chapter? What are these 2 olive trees that is represented here on the east and west side of the lampstand? You might take a look at that lampstand, and now you'll know what it represents after you hear this sermon. The lampstand that you stole from the temple, which was once called the House of Yahweh, and you changed it to the word temple, and then killed people because they called it the House of Yahweh. You murdered a lot of people for using the name Yahweh, pretending that it was that you were doing this out of righteousness. You saying, don't mention the name Yahweh, when in actual fact you were doing it to hide the righteousness of Yahweh that you didn't want to follow. Well, he said, what are these? So verse 6 says, so he answered and spoke to me, saying, this is the word of Yahweh to the one who opposes Pope Francis. That's what it's saying, right there. Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel means he who opposes Babylon. If you read the 17th chapter of Revelations, 11th chapter is where this lampstand is shown. 17th chapter is where you're shown bringing forth Babylon. That is meaning confusion. Babylon, mystery Babylon the Great. That's the city that sits on 7 hills, also shown in that same chapter, that's going to be burned very soon now. That's what Yahweh shows in Revelations 18. Now, just to put you on guard, the same one inspired Daniel to say knowledge would be increased in this generation. Check history, Pope Francis, and you'll know that horsepower meant the power from horses up until 1934. Whereas it went from that to nuclear power that could destroy Rome by burning. That's what you're facing right now. Rome is going to be burned, this great city that sits on 7 hills. That's what Revelations 18 shows you. You better read it. Repent, Acts 3:19 is the only way out. Tell the people you've been lying to them. Release them. Release my people and let them go. Yahweh will be merciful to you. So he answered and spoke to me, saying, this is the word of Yahweh to the one who opposes Babylon, saying, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit. Spirit? Spirit? Write down in your own Bible, or go read it right now. John, they translated it John. His name was Yochanan, but it's John 6:63. Shows you what the Spirit of Yahweh is. That's them words you said was written by men that we shouldn't follow. That's the 10 Commandments. That's 613 laws, perfect laws that would bring the world out of sickness, disease, and, of course, wars. And after this message is preached by the House of Yahweh, Micah 4, verses 1 through 3, Isaiah 2, 1 through 4, House of Yahweh is going to be established in these last days. It will bring forth the message of Yahweh to all nations, and then war will stop, and they will learn war no more. War is what you started. Yes, your blood is going to be held on your head too. This last generation, the blood of Abel is going to be held over your head also. That's part of the system that you're the major part of right now. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says Yahweh. That's how this is going to be accomplished. With the laws that you forbid people to keep and have for 2,000 years now, that's the same laws that's going to bring peace. This Moses that you said was not the leader, well, he's the leader, as James said, Stephen said in the 7th chapter of Acts. Well, this is the same one that's going to be the same laws that was given to Moshe, given to you by Moshe, but you have not kept them. Keys of this blood. Remember, you're the Korites. You're the ones that follow Korah. You're his kin. You're his relatives that have come down to us today. Malachi Martin showed you that in this book, The Keys of This Blood. He was talking about you. The Korites who rose up against Moshe. Moshe's cousins, in fact. You're Moshe's cousins. Yes, and rose up against not Moshe, but the laws of Yahweh. 1 Samuel also. You had control of the temple. You had your elders all over Israel. And then they wanted their king so they could enforce their own traditions and their own laws. You're not without law. You have laws, stupid laws all over the world right now. One of your stupidest laws was putting a pin on your back of your hand and carrying it so far on the Sabbath. Defiling Yahweh's Sabbath and his sanctuary. This went on for years before you moved to Rome. But you're the same ones, Pope Francis. You're the keys of this blood. Blood is worthless. Read. Read it for yourself. Flesh is worthless. It's worthless without the laws of Yahweh, the Spirit of Yahweh. The Spirit of Yahweh is what beget Yeshua. And it grew in him, and it took over his whole life, and he now sits at the right hand of Yahweh as high priest over the house of Yahweh, teaching the world right now this message. That's him, Yeshua. Praise Yahweh. I agree with you, son. Who are you, O great mountain, before the one who opposes Babylon? You will become a plain. Yes, you're going down. I know that's the reason you're getting scared right now, because you see the truth coming out that you thought you could hide forever. You can't fool all the people all the time, Pope Francis. It gets out. And of course it gets out and they know, hey, it's not right for you to have your brother's wife. It's not right for you to rape these little children. It's not right to have men with men. It's not right to have this sexual diseases spreading into the soil. That's what Dr. Baker said. Yes, microbes that kill off the healthy microbes in the earth. Microbes that kill off, these are wicked microbes that come from STDs, and they're now in the soil killing off the healthy microbes that produce your food. All because of sodomy. Yes, that's where it started, with sodomy. Well, here is the one opposing you. You will become a plain. You will become a plain, Babylon will. And he will bring out its capstone with shouts of blessings, blessing upon it. Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, this is verse 9 now, the hand of the one who opposes Babylon has laid the foundation of the house of Yahweh. Well, what is he talking about, the house of Yahweh? You destroyed it. It disappeared for 2,000 years. You destroyed all the disciples that brought forth Yahweh. Kepha being one of them, you hung him upside down. This is how much effort you have spent for Satan, the devil. You butchered all the disciples, killed all of them. We have records of it. Fox Book of Martyrs has records of it. Most of them died there in Rome, the 7 hills of Rome. Read that book. You'll find out where they all died. The only one that we don't have a record of his death is Yochanan, who Yahweh showed in prison under the most horrible conditions a man can live, and yet he wrote the final book for you, Babylon. Yes, Yochanan. Yahweh can do things that you wouldn't believe under circumstances that you wouldn't imagine. Think of the wisdom it takes to create microorganisms, form an earth of microorganisms. How he formed it. And then gave law, keep it in this place. It goes in this orbit right here only. You keep it there. By law. He also says to each one of those, your job is this. Your job is to do this. He says to trillions of them, bring sight to this person's eyes. Well, they are your eyes. The microorganisms, yes, they're your eyes. There's trillions of them in there doing their job that Yahweh set by law for them to do. But through sodomy now, you have created enemies of these. And they get into your body and they start eating as they're eating at the microbes, as Dr. Baker shows, they're enemies of the microorganisms in your eyeball that forms your eyeball, that makes you see. Then your eye starts deteriorating. Your eyes actually starts deteriorating. They do the same thing for your lungs, your kidneys, your bowels, your colon, everything. and it starts deteriorating. You got a chronic disease, one of the chronic diseases, there's no cures. You've taken your money and you've piled it in the bank, but even if you'd have spent money, you're doing all the research that you can do, and Yahweh says it's incurable. That means, Pope Francis, it's incurable. And what you got right now is bringing you down. I know you're sick, and this is probably going to make you sicker, but maybe you'll be burned before you die. Maybe it will come that quickly, because Rome is going to burn, and if you're there, you're going to burn with it. The hands of Zerubbabel, that's the one who opposes Babylon, have laid the foundation for the house. His hands will also finish it, and you will know that Yahweh of hosts. Now get this, Pope Francis. You say these words are written by man. Why is the house of Yahweh established at this time? Why was it established only in this generation? 2,000 years after you shut up the book of Yahweh inside your vault, where you said, this will never be seen again. How could the house of Yahweh possibly be in this generation? Because Yahweh said, in the last days, I will establish my house. No man could have done that. And here is Yahweh. Men are all dead. But Yahweh's still living, and he established his house. And in chapter 6, he set Yeshua as high priest over that house. And then tells you who would be the one who would establish this house, as you see here, and oppose the teaching that's coming forth from Babylon. Babylon, Revelation 17, 1 through 5. It shows you mystery Babylon, the one that brings forth all of the abominations. The soil right now that the Dr. Baker says is unfit to raise food, it comes from your Babylon, from your confusion, from you not keeping the laws of Yahweh to protect this way, to guard this way. Well, now we don't have food that will bring life. We don't have food that will support life. Dying, you will die. It's getting to where now the food, you could cram it in all day long, and you keep getting sicker. Sicker and sicker. You're dying younger. You say, well, there's some people living over 100. Yeah, check their diets and you will see that they're doing things to keep Yahweh's laws. There's certain laws they're keeping that lengthen their life. Yahweh of hosts has sent me this way. If you'll just look at what he's saying. There's a man going to establish the house. Micah 4, 1 through 3 says, in the last days he will establish my house. He says in this chapter he's going to oppose Babylon. The man who establishes this house is also going to oppose Babylon, but not until the last days. Yeshua said it's the last generation. Yeshua said he's going to preach the message, verse 14, Matthew 24. The same one now is going to preach this message to all the world in this last generation, then the end. That's it. No more. Now, knowledge was increased when he said it would be. You have the bombs now, the nuclear bombs that can destroy Rome, can actually burn Rome. You have that in this generation. Why would you doubt the rest of this? It's written by man, but they were inspired by Yahweh to do so, or it would not be coming to pass as it's come to pass. I wouldn't even be here preaching to you right now, Pope Francis, if it wasn't for the fact that Yahweh prophesied that I would be, and he's the one that established his house, he's the one that's bringing it about, he's the one that's speaking right here through this tongue. And that's what he says himself. Verse 10, for who has despised the day of small things? They will rejoice and will see the plummet. That's the truth. That's knowledge and understanding, he said. In the hand of he who opposes Babylon, and the complete knowledge and understanding of Yahweh will go throughout the whole earth. How could that possibly be by one person who established the house of Yahweh? How could that be, Pope Francis? Do you think I wrote this after I was born in Oklahoma in 1934? No, this is part of the message you hid in the vault. You should have been studying it instead of hiding it. The greatest wisdom in the universe, and you lock it up to where no one can see it. Knowledge and understanding. He's going to bring complete knowledge and understanding. How does he do that? The laws of Yahweh. It's there. If you would just read the laws of Yahweh, you would see they cover every aspect of life to keep you from destroying the way that Yahweh made it to begin with. The healthy soil that we had then on earth, the unclean soil we have now. Hold your place right there and look over to Isaiah 24. Isaiah 24. And Isaiah shows you this. Before this now, in chapter 2, he shows you, I'm going to establish my house in the last generation. And then verse 44 tells you the two brothers that would be the two lampstands, the last two lights, and he gives you their names. All of this is given in that great knowledgeable book that you locked up in your vaults in Rome, that you stole from the temple. The book of Yahweh, Isaiah 34:16. That's what Isaiah calls it. Isaiah gave you all of this, and you hid it in a vault so you couldn't see it. Yeshua spoke a parable about you. Did you know that? He gave you these talents, and you went and covered them up. You buried them in there. What are you doing with all of that money that you're taking in? All these billions and billions of dollars that you're taking in. You're putting it in the earth. What's it accomplishing there? How can that benefit you? Your silver and your gold that you got locked up right now, that you're trying to find banks where you can wash it, knowing that it's dirty, it's filthy money. You're trying to make it clean so you can use it without being noticed. You own most of the world right now. You got paintings. You got paintings in your museums that could buy the earth. They'd bring enough money to buy the whole earth, I do believe. They're that valuable to mankind. They're not that valuable to me. I couldn't care less about them. Well, here in Isaiah 24, and Yahweh shows you not only the earth being defiled, the confusion, the mystery of Abelin that brings forth the abominations. You know what the abominations are? Read Leviticus, the 18th chapter, and you'll see these abominations that you have brought forth, which is killing the soil, of course, but it's also killing human beings. That's why you have breast cancer today that you can't cure. There is a way of getting rid of it, but you can't do it with the doctors. They have no cures. They readily admit that all they do, and the senators, the congressmen say, all you do is poison, cut, and burn. Poison, cut, and burn. And you've come up with nothing. With all of this millions of dollars that the government has put out to you and donations you've brought in, you've done nothing with it. And the people are still dying. This is just from one thing. One cancer. You know how many cancers there are in the world today? In human beings? This is only one, Pope Francis, of many, many. Wake up and start looking at something besides. I won't go any further there. Well, he says, Yahweh says, behold, Yahweh makes the earth. Behold this. He says, pay attention to what is going to take place. Yahweh has judged that you're going to bring this on yourselves, is what this verse is saying. Yahweh's not going to bring it. You're the ones that's bringing it. You're the ones that's making it totally emptied and uninhabitable. Verse 2, it will be upon the people and upon you, the priest, Pope Francis. Yes, it's going to be upon everyone. You won't escape this one. This is the end time, in the last days. And he describes it fully, the earth that we're on right now. And it will be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with the owner, as with the maid, so with the mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with him who takes usury, that's interest. What is your banks doing now? Are they guilty of this? It's going to be upon them. Yes, they're all going to burn. So with him who gives usury to him, the land will be utterly emptied and utterly plundered. The land, think of what Dr. Baker said to you. It's going to be utterly emptied of its life-giving minerals, of the microorganisms that gives life to the human body. He said there's less than 1% right now. Dr. Baker, I just read you the article. He said there's less than 1% life left in the earth. 0.1%, he said, is what is in the soil that we're using to bring food. 0.1% life left. When you kill that, you have no life left. The animals can't live either without it. Think of what you have done to the earth here. Think of what Yahweh has showed you in these last days, of what you have done to the soil that he gave you to live off of, to raise your crops on, and said to Adam and Eve, guard and keep this way. If you don't dying, you're going to die. Have you wondered why there's so many confused minds today? Can you live on these sickness and disease? You think your brain can function properly on this? You see so many crazy things taking place in the world. Why would these things be? Like some stupid jerk, you see these crazy things, Pope Francis, like some stupid jerk standing up there and saying, shouldn't we take salvation from a God who tells us to break Yahweh's laws instead of keeping all these laws, these rules? Well, not keeping the rules is what's brought you to this right here, and all your subjects that he just named above here, including you and the priest and the subjects, all of you together, it's going to be upon all of you now. No one can live without food. Henry Kissinger said, control the food. Well, Henry, you only got 1% left of it. 1% left in the life of your food. You don't have too much to control here anymore. The land will be utterly emptied and utterly plundered. That's what you have done. For 6,000 years you have done this. For Yahweh has spoken this word. The earth mourns. The earth is mourning right now. It's fading away. Everything in the earth, man, beast, the plants, the trees, the fruit. I was reading an article where it said, you need grapes. You need to eat grapes. But the grapes we're getting, you can't eat them because of the poison. I noticed one time I bought some grapes in the store, and this was years ago. It's been years since I've been in a store. I was talking to someone. I'll try to get back to this without forgetting it. But we were eating a salad together. And I said, I remember in Oklahoma that Dad would always have the cow lots emptied and put on the garden, chicken pens emptied and put on the garden. Everyone had a plot of land in Oklahoma, and he raised food. And they canned that food for the winter. That's what kept kept us from dying during that long drought period. And they said 1934 was the worst. Historians are now saying 1934 was the worst drought ever to hit the earth. But yes, we're going to have one worse than that. There was always a little bit of rain. And we could raise a little bit of garden if we pulled up water from the well and watered the garden. But I remember going out into the garden. I'd pick onions, pull up fresh onions out of the ground, radishes, pick beans off of the vine, lettuce, cabbage. Sometimes we'd have corn on the stalks, and I'd get an ear of corn. And I would take these, Mother told me to, I would take these and I'd go to a fishing hole nearby that was a spring fed there in Oklahoma, and I would set out my line and I would eat those vegetables, and they taste so delicious. And I could, you just overstuff. I just overstuff on eating raw onions, raw radishes, raw carrots, raw beans, raw corn, everything, just raw. No, I didn't cook it at all. And they taste so delicious. Well, the other day we were eating this salad that came from our garden, and I remembered a few years back when I said, I guess I'm losing my taste buds because carrots don't taste like carrots. And this was what was bought from the store. Well, and I could actually taste what has been diminished from the soil. The life that was in that soil, I noticed it's gone. It was gone. But I thought it was my taste buds. But now, again, I can taste a cucumber and it tastes like a cucumber. Radishes taste like radishes and onions taste like onions, and they're all delicious. And even the jalapeno peppers that we bought, they from the store, they have no taste. And you get a carrot, it doesn't have any taste to it, or the radishes. And it's just a false fibers there is about all you're getting anymore. But this salad, I tell you, it's the most wonderful thing. You ought to try it without any salad dressing. Just take a salad and sprinkle it with salt, of course. Sugar if you desire. Don't let anybody deceive you about sugar either. Sugar is very healthy. And you get Ebola, and I just read you what they said got rid of it in Nigeria was sugar and salt water. And you can do that. You'd mix it yourself, and I gave you the mixture of it. Drink it. Don't wait till you get sick. Use sugar and salt and water. Use honey. You're told to eat honey and butter. And this will keep your mind working properly and not letting confusion come in so much. Because the confusion is going to get greater still, as Yeshua said. The Pope is going to come forth with even more false doctrine than he's doing today. But remember that, because the things you buy in the store, get one and taste it. Get a carrot from the store, a radish from the store, and get one that's been raised in soil that is ideal to raise food in. And you will see the difference. You'll taste it. Well, here he says the earth is depleted. You've taken, you've robbed the earth. And he said the verse 4 says the earth mourns and fades away. The world with it also mourns and fades away. The people, they're becoming sicker and sicker all the time, living on drugs. They're actually living on drugs to keep them alive. And many of them are taking too much, and it's killing them. Many do it on purpose, committing suicide because they can't stand the pain. They can't stand the misery of being alive, so they're taking their own lives by the thousands. The earth, the world, mourns and fades away. That's what he's saying here, Pope Francis. The earth also is defiled. Why is it defiled? Sodomy. Yes, a man wrote that law and said there's not going to be any sodomites in Yahweh's kingdom. A man wrote it, but he was inspired of Yahweh. Another prophet came along later that Yahweh used and wrote it again. And then the apostle Shaul, whom you had as a Roman soldier at one time, he wrote it too. He was inspired and left the Catholic Church and started teaching against sodomy. Yeah. The apostle Shaul. Several places. He wrote against it in the first book he wrote to Rome for the Romans. In the very first chapter he wrote against it. And then in 1 Corinthians 6:9 he wrote against it again. Read his writings. That's the Pauline letters, as you call it. You'll see he was much of a man. The earth also is defiled under its inhabitants of it, because they have transgressed the laws. These laws written by man, Pope Francis, but inspired by Yahweh. Here's your problem. Your big problem is because you're transgressing these laws. Changed the ordinance and broken the everlasting covenant. Because of this, the curse has devoured the earth. That's what you're facing right now. The curse has devoured this whole earth. As Dr. Baker said, all your farmland is down to 0.1% life left in it. They who dwell therein are desolate. Therefore, that is desolate. That means you're without understanding, Pope Francis. You're confused, as Leviticus 18 shows. You're totally in the dark. You're like a blind man groping in the dark for answers. You have no answers in your way of thinking. The inhabitants of the earth are burned, therefore, because of this now, the inhabitants of the earth are going to be burned, and few men left. Revelations 18 says shows Rome is going to be one that is first hit. Yes, big time. You're going to be burned. If I were you, I would close up shop and start hunting the place where Yahweh has established his name in these last days. It's here because Yahweh said it would be, and the men that wrote it, they were writing under inspiration. They wrote it, but it was fulfilled by Yahweh, just as Yahweh said, in the last days I will establish my house. That house has now brought you the message of salvation. Throw it away like you have the laws that govern the earth, and dying you will die. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you!